right. My name is Sarah.
My name is Mujib.
And welcome to another episode of Let's Get to It. This is episode 34. And we're going to be talking about equality and equanimity. And that's a big topic.
Right. Totally.
We can go in a lot of different directions, and we have. So full disclosure, Mujib and I actually devoted an entire session to just like ruminating on this topic. And so a lot of time's been spent teasing this out, and but we're ready for it.
Yeah, that's helpful too. It is such a big and multifaceted conversation to be had. Like, what aspects of life can we talk about equality and equanimity in? It could be everything from the macro, like the whole way the world works, and how are divisions and lines drawn, and how is the pie broken up to different people, versus also how the very, very micro of it all, like how is my house and the chores and all of the different, aspects of my life broken up. But even to take it deeper than that, not just superficial, but like emotionally, like, am I always the one coming to the table with this sort of energy or emotion, and the people that I'm involved with are never coming to the table with that? Am I always the one having the great idea and everybody else isn't having the great idea? But then also to bring that to equanimity, is it my job to have the great idea and your job to execute that great idea, and this person's job to distribute that great idea? And how do we all do our jobs to the highest so that we are having equanimity, and that we all do have stake in equity in what we're doing?
Right. Like we talked a little bit about how, if you bring it back to the workplace or the household, like what you're bringing to the table, the thing that you're doing, does it have, this is all an exercise in like what has equal weight and equal value, right? So again, we all have these different skill sets. Like you bring something to the table, I bring something to the table, they're different. But the idea is that, something may take you longer, take me longer, but how do we weigh out that, these contributions, and how do we value each other and value ourselves so that, it's not just having equality on paper, but it's also like a state of being and a feeling, right? Yeah. Do you feel valued? Do you feel like you have equal access, that your opinions are taken seriously, that your work is of value? Like there's so much to it. Right. So,
Wow. That we'll come back to this example in a second, but it's because you and I've talked about it so much, I want to just touch on this for a second. So we're talking about sports a lot because right now in popular news and things like that, you have the Sha'Carri Richardson instance. You have also the Naomi Osaka, I think is how you pronounce her name, her instance, and then you also have the Simone Biles instance. So let's look at these three situations for a second, and we'll look at Simone Biles first, and we'll see the fact that Simone Biles is being told that she can't do certain things. Like there's certain levels of her athleticism that she's not able to express because of the fact that these other people are getting put at risk trying to do that same thing. Now, again, this is just within the US. Like, that's not the people in Russia being like, she can't do those backflips. It's the people in the US being like, she can't do the backflips because it's going to make other people try too hard, try to get on the team. And it's not equal. It's not fair that she can do that. So if we strip it all the way back down, it's like, it's hurting somebody's feelings that she's able to do all these flips. Right. So that's one instance. You can't do the flips because it's hurting somebody's feelings.
Right.
But then you look at Naomi Osaka, or I'm going to stop saying her last name because I don't exactly know how to pronounce her last name. But if you look at Naomi and you look at Sha'Carri Richardson, you see two people whose mental state and feelings aren't being taken into account at all. Right? Like, it doesn't matter that your mother died. It doesn't matter that any of these other things happened to you in your life leading up to this. You're supposed to do this, X, Y, and Z. And this other person, doesn't matter if you had a mental health day that you don't feel up to sitting here and letting us berate you and throw all these questions at you, doesn't make you feel right. It hurts your feelings to sit here and take all these questions, but we're not going to take that into account. Your feelings don't actually matter. But this person's feelings matter enough that we're going to change the entire rule book for the sport. So again, where's the equality? Wow, where's the equanimity? Like, are we actually equal if my feelings don't matter, but this person's feelings matter enough to change all the rules? Right? So it's
So glad you brought all that up, because that's so clearly just demonstrates too, right? Like this value that we're placing on people, right? And clearly, like, let's just say what it is. Like, we're basically saying, women of color, that your feelings are not as valid
right.
as white women, as an example, right?
Mhm.
Because we're talking about female sports at this point. And to tease that out a little bit more, and we've talked about this, Mujib, the other infuriating thing about Simone Biles is, even like just zooming out, even just from the wider gender perspective, it's upholding this notion of that women are fragile and to be protected in general, or at least that's the excuse that these guys are using. Oh, that it's out of people's safety. Like, right, that was one excuse that was used. Oh, this is dangerous. This is going to be dangerous for other folks to attempt it. And like, that's, I mean, I call bullshit on that, right? Because we have advancements in sport and human performance constantly. And in other sports, and particularly male sports, right, these kind of advancements are, championed in some corners, right? Like, we're elevating the game. This is going to get more viewers. This is good. This is going to bring a lot of excitement. And, and again, it's like, why are you, you're not only holding Simone Biles back, you're holding a generation
Right.
of young women back
Right.
by capping this person's excellence and capping this Black woman's excellence in particular, right? Which is so clearly deliberate.
Right.
So that's messed up. I mean, it's like, it's the consequences are so much bigger. And
Right.
that, I think, is like,
Yeah.
I think about that too. It's like, you're not just, this isn't only about Simone Biles. This is like an entire generation of women. Like, you're just saying, like, wait, we're going to put up barriers to your excellence and how amazing you are, right?
Right.
Because we're, oh, it's not fair to the women who can't do it right now. Well, in a few years, more women are going to be able to do this, of all color and creed and, athleticism, right? But you have to let the sport, you have to push those boundaries. As an
Right.
athlete, I think that's, so I watch video of her and I'm like, that's dope. This is
Right.
amazing. Why would
Right.
you not, I don't know. So I think about it from that perspective as well.
And we've had that conversation multiple times about, in regards to other things. Like, I see Simone Biles, and yes, I respect and I revere her athleticism, but she's also an example to me that any boundary can be pushed.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not a gymnast, but I take inspiration from Simone Biles.
Yeah.
Right? Because
Absolutely.
she's showing me that, like, whatever I thought was the cap of what is possible is blown off.
Right.
It's another example of how the cap of what is possible is blown off.
Yeah.
Look at the slam dunk competition in athleticism. Look at the fact that they kick field goals from farther away now.
Yep.
All these different realities that are just like, nah, bro, we're more advanced than that. We're more advanced. Like, first you have to move the goalpost to the back of the end zone. It can't be in the front of the end zone anymore. Okay, well, we'll do that. Okay, well, now you got to move the fucking whole thing back now.
The 3-point line.
The 3-point line is going to drop back. All these different things are going to drop back, because, like, you're going to tell Steph Curry he can't shoot from that deep. We can't all shoot from that deep. You can't shoot from that deep. No, it doesn't work that way. And the macro of it all is you hold back society with that mentality, right? Like, you think about how many W.E.B. Du Boises there could have been, how many W.E.B. Du Bois, how many Frederick Douglass that there could have been, if motherfuckers weren't being, if it wasn't illegal to be that way, or if it wasn't a reason to be terrorized to be that way. How many brilliant minds have been stunted because of atrocity? How many brilliant ideas have been stunted because of genocide? How many beautiful people, artists, musicians, actors, authors, how many of these brilliant minds could have been brought forth if the status quo didn't really just focus on this one very narrow view of humanity and say that this is the best? These are the most brilliant minds. And in another 10 years, we're going to widen it. And in another 10 years, we're going to broaden that. And another 10 years, you know what I mean? So it goes from the white man is the only one who can act in a movie with any serious role to look at how big the world is now in acting. Look at how many best actors there are. Like, And even think about that, like best actor versus best actress, and well, why don't we just get the best role? Like all these different
Right.
ways that the status quo is continuing to be upheld, and who designed the status quo again, that says who are the final rule setters, who are the final gatekeepers that are saying y'all aren't equal to us, or
Right.
you're not equal to what we perceive is the best, because
Yep.
that's really what it is like, in coming back to equanimity, like, do I value your work enough to say that it's equal to the work that I'm doing,
Mm-hmm.
in a
Mm-hmm.
way that lets me see that we are balanced people, you know
Mm-hmm.
what I mean? Or do I not value what you're doing? Do I not value your situation? And so therefore I don't believe you're equal to me, and therefore I'm going to belittle you, and I'm going to disrespect you, and I'm not going to value the work that you're doing or the time you're putting in, because I don't believe that it's as valuable as my time. This is, again, these are, and I'm using vagary, I'm talking about specific instances, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
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 I think too, bring it to sort of Hollywood and acting. And then that's, we talk a lot about how important representation is, and representation matters, to see those stories reflected back, and not just people of color playing stories written by white people. Like,
Mm.
that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about like writers' rooms being full, like telling stories from all kinds of perspectives and backgrounds, right? Um, and one of my favorite actors, I'm sure I know I've mentioned this to you, is Riz Ahmed. Is like just he's been one of my favorite actors for the last 7 years, and he writes extensively. He's part British, part Pakistani, and is a Muslim actor, and has been trailblazing and breaking all kinds of barriers for Muslim men. And he's just like, it's not enough. Like, I just want to be Joe in any movie. Like, I don't want to be typecast as the taxi cab driver and the right. So he writes a lot about, how he started his career and had just was very pigeonholed, right? Like, okay, you present this way, or you're great. Like, we can put you in this role. You're going to be this supporting actor, right? You're going to help tell this story, or you fill, the token character for this. And he's incredible. And he's like, no, he's a leading man, and is an amazing actor and storyteller, and deserves that ability. Like, Hollywood's been just so
Jeez.
problematic for so many
Right.
reasons, right? And also to kind of keep perpetuating all of these, whether it's how we view women, how we view people of color, how we perceive people of different religious backgrounds. Like, Hollywood, I think, has been one of the biggest perpetrators. We've talked about in our consent episode, we've talked about the pornography industry, right? Like, who is giving us, how we see the world, television, movies, popular culture, music, all of these things. It's like, it's just this, there's, yeah, it's how we understand ourselves, right? Like, and a lot of those messages have been effed up for far too long, right? It's
Mhm.
like, if I've been consuming messages about how, I'm a cis white woman, like how I'm supposed to present and be in the world, I've consumed 37 years of messaging. And then, thankfully, like, if you're breaking free from a lot of those messages, you're like, oh, that's not the only way to be. Cool, because that has felt really wrong.
Right.
There's something off about that.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, yeah. So I mean, we're on that topic, but
Right, right. But it's the truth. And again, if we look at the way that, like I said, it holds society back, you have a
yeah,
whole generation of people like yourself who are just breaking through, who
yeah,
can look at your own parents and your mother and her mother and generations of people that are your same exact demographic, that still hold these standards, or that still uphold this bullshit division, um, and are still following you to try to break through. Like, thank God that we get to live long enough to watch our children become, because they help us to come through even farther, even more. Like, for as
mm,
much equality and as much social social like alertness or awakeness that I have, I can only imagine how much farther my kids are going to bring me. You know
mm-hmm,
what I mean? Because they're going to tell me the things like, hey, that's not the way we do things anymore, or that's not that's not okay anymore. You know what I mean? And even in the way that I parent my children, to realize, like, here are certain aspects that I can't hold on to, or here are certain aspects that I have to still hold on to. And then later down the line, they're gonna let me know. So again, it's I say all that to say that, um, when we can broaden the range of what's possible, then everybody has a place to feel good and to feel valued, because we're valuing, we're broadening the spectrum of what we find value in. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
and to speak to that from a different angle, um, it's also a narrowing of the shit that we don't tolerate, right?
Right.
So like in the last generation, we tolerated a lot more bullshit from more people, right? Like, let's say, let's just take one person to give the example of, like, the white cis man. There was more tolerated from the white cis man in 1952 than was tolerated in 1972, than is tolerated in 92, than is tolerated in 2022, right? By 2022, like, no, like, you can't just beat up Rodney King because he might have been on PCP.
Right.
We learned that already. You can't do that, right?
Yep.
If you try to get away with that, well, we're gonna lock you up.
Yep.
You know? And so again, it's you see these differences in the way that we tolerate less. I visualize it mostly as we accept more. I accept that this person can be great and that person can be great. I accept that you can have value and they can have value and this other person can have value. Like, I accept all those things. The reality is that there's less that I tolerate. I don't tolerate foul language to people that I care for, just because. I don't tolerate racist jokes. They're not funny. They never were. They were only funny to one demographic of people, and then to anybody else who accepted that demographic of person thinking that was funny, right? So again, it's not this. So again, we're finding equanimity, we're finding equality, we're opening those doors. We're not just adding seats to the table, we're adding tables to the room. You know what I mean? And so, and that, for me, that's what equanimity actually is about. It's not just adding seats to my table. It's about adding whole tables to the room.
I love that visual of, right? Because let's break that down a little bit, because if you think about the adage of, and this is, this is sort of commonplace linguistically, right? Like, oh, we just want a seat at the table. Well, the table's fucked. Like, the table's been fucked. Excuse my language. Right. So, oh my God, I'm blanking on her name, but she just refused a position at UNC Chapel Hill to go to Howard, right? I'm just thinking of this example, like refusing a seat at the table because it's like, no, you know what? Your table is fucked. So I'm going to bring my table over here. And so this idea that, yeah, we've got this room and we actually we need some different tables.
Yeah.
And yeah, we need more seats. We need more tables. We need, because other tables are kind of broken. It's like, yeah, no, we don't need more seats at that broken table.
Right.
Because then we're just continuing to sort of replay from this old playbook has clearly demonstrated that it's not working. Right. Well, it's working for a few people, but it's really not working for, it's holding generations back. It's just, so, no, I love that visual. Like, more, that's not the solution. And that's been like, that's been such a common phrase. Like, I grew up with that. I grew up in a lot, I've been politically active since my teens. And, even through college, like, yeah, it was all about like, okay, how do we get to this neoliberal sort of, yeah, it's just a seat at the table. That's what we want. We just want a seat at that table. And it's like, no, but the tables, no.
Right. No, and this generation is like, no, I don't want to sit at that table. I don't want to sit at that table. Like, me personally, as an individual, like as Mujib, I don't want to sit at that table. I've sat around it. I've sat at it. I know the people at it. That shit is lame. Like, because I don't want who's at the head of that table to be the one who's directing my conversation.
Right.
I don't want the asshole who's the biggest asshole to be the one who's fucking guiding the conversation.
Right.
Leading the conversation. Like, that's bogus. And it takes the ability to not just recognize that that's bogus, because we've all known it was bogus.
Mm-hmm.
What we weren't presented with as a society, or like on again within popularity, what we weren't presented with was a cooler alternative.
Mm.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like Al Pacino's cool as shit. Denzel Washington is fucking cooler.
Mm-hmm.
Why? Well, because Denzel Washington has more dimension.
Mm-hmm.
Denzel Washington had to be a bigger person to be at the same fucking table.
Right.
Al Pacino could have been anybody. He could have fucked off any different direction. Now, don't get me fucked up. Like, and now I'm cursing like crazy right now, but you know, don't get me thrown off too much. Like, Al Pacino's a great actor. I love Al Pacino's movies, right?
Yeah.
And I love him as an actor. But as a person, as a caricature of an actor, he doesn't have the same full holistic dimension as Denzel Washington.
Mm-hmm.
Like, here's a great example. Al Pacino got a seat at the table. Denzel Washington had to build his own table.
Right.
Like, he had to watch the table manifest around him.
Right. Right.
Right?
Yeah.
Because he wasn't welcome. And again, we talk about Dr. J, we talk about these athletes who, like, you're not allowed to play in the league.
Mm-hmm.
Well, fuck it, we're gonna go start our own league.
Right.
And then, well, people, oh, man, we really can't get anywhere unless these guys are actually allowed to play, right?
Yeah.
So again, it's like you stop closing the doors to people, you broaden the range. And now what you're seeing in 2021, 2022 is that if you don't, fuck it, we're gonna still rock over here.
Well, and it really does bring everybody up.
Yes.
That's, and it's like, we've talked about this, personally, when we just kind of get together, we're talking about things like, I keep going back to kind of these capitalism's notion of scarcity, right? It's like capitalism teaches us to be afraid and in competition, and like, no, for me to get ahead, I got to step on you, because there's not enough for us both, right? Like, that's how society's positioned. And it's just this constant like elbowing, like, what, why are people so it's like, I think back to Trump, sorry to bring his name up, but the stories that he would weave, like, the people are at our borders, they're, taking, all these fear mongering stories of just like shit that's not actually true. Just muted myself. There we go. We're live. I'm like trying to get into the light. I'm muting myself. But in all seriousness, right? Like, so what do? Like, you terrify people. You tell them stories of like, you're going to lose this. You're going to lose your way of life. They're going to take something from you. And instead of like, no, we live in this time of amazing ingenuity and abundance, and there is enough. So to bring it back to Simone Biles, like, let her do her thing, because it's going to bring everybody up. Let Sha'Carri Richardson run. It's going to bring everybody up. To not have her at the games, like, and speaking from an athlete's perspective, I want to play with the best. I always want to be, also professionally, I always want to be in the room with the best. And that I don't even need to be the best person, right? I love when somebody's better than me at you name whatever, because it's like, okay, great, because that's going to bring me up. And I'm, I don't know, that's how I see things. So all of this, it's like, you're not just shutting out one person. That in itself is completely wrong, but you're just holding down everybody.
Right.
At that point.
That's the American way.
That is the American
thus far,
way.
You know what I mean? Thus far, that's the status quo of this country.
Just so
and
it's
not just
can
American,
climb to the top.
It's a global. That's a global practice.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And it's orchestrated, it's calculated, right?
Yeah.
It's studied and it's taught. How do we maintain power, right?
Right.
And whether that power is power over another person, dominance, how do we maintain dominance? Like we were talking the other day, you got to be the biggest asshole in the room, as taught to you by the biggest asshole in the room.
Yeah.
Right. So how do we maintain dominance? How do I maintain superiority in these situations? Well, I can't maintain superiority if I allow everybody to be equal.
Right.
How am I going to maintain superiority as a power structure if everybody's able to have an equal say at the table? You know, I think that like I don't know. It just made me think about South American apartheid and when apartheid ended and how folks were like, no, now we're not telling anybody they can't speak. Everybody has to speak. Everybody speak your experience. And now let's see. Now let's actually see. Like you, devious person, are going to talk about your entire experience. And your victim is going to talk about their entire experience. And the witness is going to talk about their entire experience. And that's the only way that we're going to develop an idea of what the fuck is actually going on, what happened.
Right.
You can't just let one person have a voice and a say about how the country is. Because you're not speaking from everybody's perspective, right? Oh, the country is great. There's no discrimination. Well, that's from the standpoint that somebody who's never been discriminated against.
Right.
Okay, well, let's find somebody who looks like somebody else who's never been discriminated against. There's no discrimination, right? Oh, of course not. I've never been discriminated against.
Right. Right.
You know? But this person right here that you're not letting at the mic on purpose, they're getting discriminated against. You know what I mean?
You know what that's making me think of is, you know, in the American justice system, a jury trial, jury of your peers.
Right.
You know, and how many instances does an all-white jury convict, in particular, you know, a Black defendant, right? A jury of your peers.
Right.
Me?
And that's 2021. We're not talking about 1916.
Exactly. I mean, I'm not talking about friggin' Atticus Finch here.
Right.
To Kill a Mockingbird. Where, you know, So absolutely. But the American justice system was designed. That was by design. Right. And we're, you know, we're lying to ourselves. You don't think that's the case.
Right. Right.
So
I mean, it's not just a lie to oneself, it's the blatant ignorance. This shit is documented. It's documented that this is how it was. And it's no documentation that says we changed it.
Right.
Right.
Absolutely.
It's getting closer because it's harder now to have that bullshit, right? Less people are accepting the bullshit. So again, it's this narrowing of what we're going to tolerate, right? Like, and who knows how it happens? Like maybe it's just the direction of perfection, right? It's how things become perfect, right? It's how we have less genocide in the world. It's how we have less atrocity in the world because we have so much genocide and so much atrocious shit happen that we're like, we can't take this anymore.
Yeah.
Right. Maybe that happens, right? I was listening to somebody the other day, like for as much equality as we find in this world, 2021 for trans people still have, there's still places everywhere in every single state that trans people still have to be scared of going out of the door as they want to be for safety's sake.
Right.
So as much as equality as we see, again, is that really? Because most those are the people that I know that still have to be afraid to just be who they are. Now, one generation before, or let's take it back 5 generations before, people having to pass as white, fearing for life, for safety, for liberty, that it's ever going to be found out that my mother's actually a Black woman. You're going to take everything away from me and lock me up, and then lock me up for marrying a white woman. You know what I mean? So it's like, this is the so every single generation we have these people that are trying to hide who they are because they don't fit, or damp down who we are, or damp down our personality, so on and so forth. How many different ways do we end up having to put the damper on ourselves for the sake of, again, the status quo telling me that, you know, I'm not allowed to be so excellent because it's not equal. It's not equal. Well, again, it's not, we're not looking for necessarily equality. It's like James Baldwin said, like, I'm not looking for you to give me anything. Just get your boot off my throat. Get your boot off my neck. That's all I want.
Right.
I'll do the rest.
Yep.
Just, you know, don't burn my church down.
Right.
Don't blow my house up. Don't lock my son up. Don't lock my dad up for nothing. Don't lock me up. Throw me in the system. Don't deny me a loan just because. And fuck that, deny me the loan, but don't deny them the ability to start a bank.
Right.
Because they're going to give me the loan.
Right.
Right. So again, it's like how many different structures are set up to create this equality that's based on, let's make sure that a certain number of people are lower down where they should be adequately and accurately, you know? I don't know. I'm easy to get off on a tangent on these topics.
No, I mean, it's important, and it's not, I just think of how much there's a lot of equality on paper, right? But that
Mm,
on paper doesn't make it a reality, like a functioning reality.
right,
Like
right.
it's not enough. Um, and I've been thinking about too, as we're having these conversations, some stuff that we talked about off air, with, I'm going to kind of veer it off a little bit into the women's equal pay movement, in particular, taking it to professional sports and the fight for, in American women's soccer in particular. Right. And, a lot of the conversation we've been having is like this idea that, kind of bring it back to a seat at the table, that in this particular fight for equal pay, like a lot of folks were like, no, you guys just should be grateful, like that you get to play soccer. It's like, really?
Right.
I think we're past that. Like, no, that we shouldn't be just grateful to get what you get. Like, it's not like food scraps, right? But that's this mentality. Like, oh, you should just be lucky that we're like, what, letting you play?
Mm,
That's absurd. That's absurd. So, um, you know, just thinking a lot about this idea. For those that are unfamiliar, the U.S. women's soccer team sued the federation in the U.S. for the pay disparity between the men's athletes and the women's athletes. Um, Separate issue from FIFA, which is the international organization. There's huge pay disparities, globally, of course. But this fight was for pay equity from, under U.S. law, right? Like the U.S. Federation is an employer, and equal pay for equal work, right? Mujib and I talked about this. The soccer field is the same size. The goal is the same size. The number of players on the field is the same size. The length of game is same size. Like, the ask is the same. The game is the same. So why is there such a pay disparity? And of course, the defense of the federation was that
So
it's
crazy.
harder for the men. Like, the men have a tougher job because of their genetic superiority, is essentially what the defense was, right?
Right, right. Which is so absurd, because it's like you're telling me that genetic superiority on the same exact playing field, doesn't that mean the inferior person is working harder?
Right, right. It doesn't even make any sense. You're like,
Right,
okay, so then they should get paid more?
right. This
That's what you're
person
saying?
seems to be dealing with more to be able to play this game.
Because it
Shouldn't
seems a
they?
lot harder since what, like our bones are shorter or something, It's like,
Right. Or lighter,
way,
right? Isn't that the truth or
yeah,
something?
way
You got,
harder. I
if you
don't,
have lighter bones, you're faster, but you're superior because inferior, blah blah. It's fucking bullshit. And again, it's the same bullshit. Like
yeah,
the motherfucker, the power structure will they will make anything true. And for those who can't see it, I'm putting big quotes on this.
yeah,
Like they'll make anything true. They
mhm,
will say, I'm going to change all the rules just to justify my point, right?
exactly.
How
Well,
absurd.
I mean, veering the car, because it's just that kind of this kind
Exactly.
of topic. Um, Changing voter registration laws around the country. Case in
Right.
point,
Right.
we're literally going to change the law to make it harder
Right.
for, in particular, BIPOC people to get to the polls. I mean, let's again be real here. Like, this
Right.
is what's happening. This is an affront. This is an attack on mostly Black, brown immigrant voting blocks, right? Which is absurd. And it's like, that, and we talk about this all the time, right? Like, for every bit of expansion, for every bit of like-minded folks that are saying like, yep, this is great, we need more of this, it's like the other side is just the teeth, the claws are out, and it's
Sheesh. Yeah.
not even subversive.
Right.
It is wide open.
Right.
The flags are being flown, um and it's just out there, and it's intense, like that. Those lines are drawn.
It's 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 an interesting time period because there's so much media now, and everything
Mm,
is so much about like what's on TV, what's on Twitter, what's on the news, like what are we, everything is about the spotlight now.
yeah.
You know what I mean? So like who's getting the spotlight? So it's even more wild because there's always been people that are advocating for this is just the way it is.
Mhm.
There's nothing you can do about it. We got to go along and get along.
Yep.
Next generation, it's not like that anymore. So those people were obviously wrong. But when it was lynching laws and people getting beat up and harassed and burned and things like that, like there was a whole particular group of people that were like, this, it's gonna change. Like we just gotta give it time. Just gotta, bear with it. This is just the way it is. It's better than it was. And boom, boom, boom. If we're talking about John Wayne beating his wife up, same deal. Whole bunch of people. This is the way it is. We'll get our change. You just gotta cover it up. Go along, get along. It's the way that it goes, right? So now in 2021, the people who are saying that, who are taking that standpoint of like, there's nothing wrong with this. This is just the way it is. You should just be happy to play the game.
Right.
They have that much more of a bullhorn to us, to the people that are easily for the people that are easily recognizing the they're easily calling the bullshit, if you will, right? For those of us that are easily recognizing the lie and the absurdity of it, we're looking at these people like, damn, like you're fucking crazy. Like you're a crazy person. But that crazy person represents a demographic that I am absolutely positive exists. I know people like that. I know, for every 25-year-old Tommy Lauren, there's a 16-year-old who's verbatim saying exactly what she's saying and using her as an example. Like Tommy Lauren is an example to some 9-year-old who's trying to grow up to be her, right? Well, Tommy Lauren might have been trying to grow up to be June Cleaver. June Cleaver, what do we even know about what June Cleaver did? Who was her friends? Who was, you know what I mean? So it's like when you look at this sort of like poodle skirt American go along to get along, what are you ignoring in the world around you? What are you ignoring in the world around you to have the perfect life in 1955? Oh, no, we're all equal under God, blah blah blah. No, we're not. This is happening. All these people. It is happening to you. This is the lack of choice that you have. This is the lack of 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 equity over your own life that you have. We were talking about, people changing their situations, trying to get out of partnerships and things like that. And this is how hard we're going to make it for you to even get out of this partnership. Like I know somebody who pulled out of a partnership recently, business partnership, and because again, they weren't valued, right? It wasn't seen like this person is driving in the snow. They're waking up an hour early. They're going out of their way. They're leaving their family, doing all these different things to come here, right? We're running the company here. I run it here. I live here. This is my house. You're coming to my house for a meeting X, Y, and Z. So if you're not on time, if you're not doing your thing, if you're not doing this thing the right way, or how I think you should be doing it, I'm going to judge you for it. Blah, blah, blah. Treat you differently for it. Cut you out for it. You don't own the same amount of stake as I own in it. Well, then you're not taking into account all the different things. It's simple as this. Pay me my mileage.
Right.
Give me a company car. I have to drive here. You're writing off your rent, like X, Y, and Z. So it's, again, do we value each other to see enough to be like, everything that you're bringing to the table is valuable and is, and actually let's use the new language. Everything that you're bringing to the room is valuable. Your perspective that you're bringing to this room and to this conversation, this dialogue is valuable. The place that you're speaking from. I mean, if we talk about the Indigenous children in Canada, like giving those people a place to speak can change the whole world. But not giving them a place to speak still upholds the same bullshit that led to the atrocity in the first place, right? So again, that's what you get. Like that's the difference in equanimity and equality and equity and the false version of all those things.
It shows up in so many aspects of our culture in terms of value, perceived value. And I know I had mentioned this to you. It's salient for me because I have someone in my life that's navigating a divorce, and my parents broke up as a kid, so I lived that experience from the child's perspective. And you know, how the court system and family court system like puts value on work in the relationship. And oftentimes, you know, it's still in this country, it's changing, yes, but still in this country, right? For the most part, the male is usually head of household, not always, but usually the breadwinner, as it's called, which is probably an interesting, I don't know the roots. Do you know the roots to that?
No,
I feel like I should look that up.
I feel like that's why radio shows have engineers on the side that are like looking this stuff up the whole
Right.
time.
I'm like, Max, can you Google that for me? We don't have a Max.
There's no Max.
It's just the two of us. When we get super famous, we'll have Max. Right. But anyway, sort of navigating that system. And if you're in a system that sort of sets up like it's not like a dollar for dollar match in terms of, I'm just going to come out and say it. Like oftentimes the woman in the relationship gets screwed, right? If they may be contributing to the relationship in non-financial ways, you know, because they're not billing for their time. If they're keeping the home or they're the primary child caregiver, you know, they're not, well, most people I know aren't keeping a spreadsheet, right, of their hours and what that time is worth. And yet the courts are often evaluating. It's just like, okay, well, how much money did you make? And now we're going to divide the assets. Right. Which is like, you know, more often than not, you know, that's the what sometimes the femme partnership is bringing, or whoever the primary caregiver is, let's just put it that way, whoever's doing the non-capital work, you know, it's, you know, what is the value in that? How are we valuing our caregivers? And we're seeing it in the pandemic as well, right? When like people were home, when suddenly daycare is not accessible, or all kinds of things, and mostly women left the workforce. Like there's a gazillion articles about it, right? How the women in the workforce have just plummeted because women came home to care for the children, and whose work is valued more, right? It's like, no, Fred, you fucking quit your job and you take care of Johnny, like, so I can keep going to work. You know, that wasn't the predominant situation for people. It was like, no, you're either you're making less, either that was the decision, right? It was purely economic decision. You're making less, so you're less value, like you're more valuable in the home. But then the mental toll, like, right, the mental health aspect of that, I don't know, there's so many ways, but basically I'm just saying, like, you know, we just really need to reevaluate like how, you know, what we value in society and what that's worth. And sometimes it only really comes up. The divorce thing is just salient for me. Like when folks are dividing assets and breaking things up and deciding what's equitable, like that's the whole idea behind a divorce, whether it's a marriage or it's like you were just saying, a business relationship, like what's an equitable split? Well, you know, what's on your spreadsheet?
Right. Well,
like,
all this stuff is in my name, so it's not right.
Yeah.
Insurance is in my name. This is in my name. That's in my name.
Yeah.
I took all the risk. Blah blah blah.
Yeah. So it's like, you know, it's really interesting how we value that, how we see value, you know, again, and I'm coming from a white cis woman's perspective, like throwing that out there. But, you know, we've talked about sexual assault, sexual encounters between two people, and whose word do we take? Who do we value? Whose experience, right? You and I have talked about the fact that, you know, a lot of people don't come forward, or when they do come forward, they're like, the institutions seem to care more about like the guy, if it was a male perpetrator, like the man's reputation. Oh, well, you know, we don't want to ruin his chances for like getting into law school. Like that could really damage his reputation. Well, what about her? You know, it's just, again, it's like, who do we place value on? And more than the way that this particular society, and I say this particular society, our American, you know, Western society, it's pretty clear that women, and in particular women of color, are at the bottom of the totem pole in terms of value.
Yeah. And
And
now
that is
that
showing up
we
again and again.
recognize trans women and trans women of color, we see even a new level of low that's been created for the status quo to decide doesn't matter. Your emotions,
Correct.
your feelings, your needs, your don't matter,
Yeah.
And so it's like, again, you just get back into that mind state of like, who's actually, and then, that makes me think of how our buying decisions are made. What are the things that we're how are we placing value on ourselves too? You know what I mean? If this
Yeah.
whole world is telling me that I'm at this certain point of this level or this class, I'm only gonna be able to get valued this much. So how do I place more value on myself? What do I do to myself? What do I buy? What can I put on? What can I wear? What can I, who can I listen to? All the different ways. How can I invest my own resources to try to elevate my own status or value to, again, some hierarchical structure. Looking up, do you see me? Am I good enough? So on and so forth. That much. And who is that person that's at the top there? And why? Yeah. I don't know. I just
Yeah, when you say stuff like that, I think of it as simple as because dress code is such a thing. Again, just codes, any kind of code, right? Language, appearance, how we dress, and when we move into certain spaces, like what that conveys. And I had mentioned to you my college experience, like the kids with the wealth and the power, like looked and dressed a certain way. So if I wanted to kind of convey that or feel like I wanted to fit in, like I adopted that dress code, and it wasn't actually a dress code I felt comfortable with. I thought actually the shit was whack. Like it's just not how I dress or not, but as a 20-year-old, 19, 20-year-old woman coming of age, wanting to fit into this and be recognized, be seen, or like, which is funny. It's like I wanted to be seen, but I was blending in with everybody else, right? How ironic is that? Like to be seen, I needed to be like everybody else. Like that's kind of, anyway, my own journey. But like kind of adopting that for, it's like what we're told is professional. Like you can't have tattoos or piercings, right? If you want to work in a bank, or you want to be a lawyer, you want to, you have to present a certain way, or even things like that. And how liberating it can be, like to all of a sudden be like, okay, no, I'm going to take an important meeting with important people, but I'm going to show up how I want to show up. Like I'm not going to wear a skirt and pantyhose and high heels for you. I'm going to rock my Nike Air Max, and I'm going to dress the way I want to, and I'm still a boss.
Right.
And so that also, like, and the freedom to be able to do that.
Right.
Is that's privilege, and that's freedom to be able to express that way and still have access to those spaces. Right. Without feeling like, okay, I have to adopt this certain way of being. And even to bring it back to the fucking Olympics, it's like the swim caps, like saying like, okay, you can't have natural fucking hair. Like that's ridiculous. Okay. So who are we basing that on? Oh, okay. So I'm me, white. I'm the model of like, this is how everybody's supposed to look, perform, how your hair is supposed, this is bullshit.
Right.
So the less it's like, is it so hard to just be fucking accommodating?
Yeah, apparently
it is.
Apparently we need whole laws around it.
Yeah, seriously, right?
Yeah.
I mean, but I just think of institution after institution after institution, right? It's like, okay, so what the British decided that no, you got to wear a tie and you got to wear, Right. I mean, right. It goes back, but totally. To think like how long those systems have carried forward, like right. This is what's presentable. This is how you project an image of social class of, right.
Well, that's why I love the whole way that like the world, and not that I think we need a balance in this, but the world will shift its whole self to fit all of us. Right. And so the reason why I say that is like, I think about law, right? I think about Ben Crump, right? The guy who's oftentimes representing families of slain African Americans, Black people, Black men, killed by police, and how that man coming into law, there are probably 90 law firms that turned their back on him.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the whole world changed now, in which there's actual legal action. It's now a whole branch of law to
Mm-hmm.
defend people against police brutality.
Mm-hmm.
That didn't exist a generation ago.
Right.
Rodney King was like the first person that got beat by the police, and people were like, this is wrong nationally. You know what I mean? Not,
Say
and
on
obviously
video.
it's not the truth, but like it is the truth. Like
Mm-hmm.
the especially in LA, like the LAPD were known for pummeling people.
Mm-hmm.
And let's not forget, like LA burned because all those guys got off.
Mm-hmm.
Like we look back at Rodney King and we think it was a great moment in history. It wasn't a great moment in history. Those guys beat that man up on film and got away with it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Which is why Minneapolis, Minnesota ended up burning,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because that man killed somebody on film and
Mm-hmm.
almost got away with it completely.
Mm-hmm.
For that day, he got away with it, right? And so again, we see this, the world shift now.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you know, a lot of people got a lot of money for the fact that this cop went to jail.
Mm-hmm.
People that otherwise wouldn't have got money because nobody cared whether or not black people would just get killed in the street.
Mm-hmm.
You know? And so again, it's, you have the whole world shift in order to make it so that there can again be equanimity. There can be black lawyers. There can be whole black law firms.
Mm-hmm.
We don't need just black lawyers to have to get into white law firms and go along to get along. And the same thing happened with Jewish lawyers in the 50s and the 60s,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so again, you see the whole world change.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, to take power away from these people who are trying to hoard it all.
Right.
Okay, you got all the power, you have all the reins, you have the status quo. Okay, well, if you're still holding on to that bullshit, we're all over here looking and being like, damn, like that shit seems fucking whack. Like I feel bad for your kids because they're gonna grow up on that same bullshit. Y'all haven't switched it up yet. You haven't broadened your horizon yet. You haven't taken the time to acknowledge that the smartest, most beautiful person isn't still just that person.
Mm-hmm.
Even though like high schools have changed and colleges have changed and workforces have changed, but this still stays the same. Damn. Well, good luck. Good luck. Good luck moving into the future without having value for the multiple facets of humanity.
Right.
You know, Stephen Hawking is a great example.
Mm-hmm.
Right. One going down in history as one of the most brilliant people in the world ever in history. 2 generations ago, if there weren't computers and things like that, the dude would have just been in the hole.
Absolutely.
Some basement, some dungeon. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
I said that to my mom at one point. I said, you know, like, and this is a whole different topic, and we can get into it at some point, but it's like, you wonder, like people talk about karma, people talk about things like that. Like you wonder why people have a reckoning. There was a whole class, upper class of people, and again, big quotes on that, upper class. They'd lock their own fucking children in basements. They'd send their own kids away for getting pregnant. They do all sorts of fucking horrible, atrocious shit, and still do to this day, to not acknowledge the fact that their kids don't fit in with their status quo.
Yeah.
They'll, you know, like it's burnt shit, and it's all built on that same burnt shit, and all the same things that say that we have this hierarchy is all still built on that same burnt perspective of you have to fit into this peg hole,
right,
in order to be accepted. Nah, man, it's not. That's so. I'm. That's why I'm oftentimes so grateful to be born when I am. Like, even though I don't have the salmon swimming in the river that I can kick out of the river, and I don't have the water that I could drink that my ancestors had, and so on and so forth. I'm glad I landed where I landed, you know, personally, in this lineage, because there was a lot of, because all that clean water got fucking polluted and putrefied. And now I'm in a generation in which we're seeing that and trying to shift that back around. And so I don't know. I don't know where I'm going with that. It's just, this topic brings up a lot in my heart, you know what I mean?
No, it's a lot of responsibility falls on us too, but it's one that I think, you know, even just with us talking with each other, it's like, like here for it.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Like, I think it is, you know, it is a special time. It is a special time because I feel like there is like a glimpse of this future and this next generation. Like, there's a lot to be thankful for. There's a lot to be hopeful about. There's a lot to still, like, can't get too complacent. There's plenty that there's unfinished business. But like, to have to be in this moment, to have that sort of understanding of the past and be working through the present towards this amazing future. Yeah. I don't know. I always like to end on a hopeful note.
Yeah, absolutely. It is. It's a hopeful thing, you know?
Yeah. And we're about wrapped for our.
Yeah. Yeah.
We could go on parts 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6.
Oh, absolutely. Easily. As long as this world is still giving us cause to value each other.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And as always, keep speaking truth to power and keep talking about things, because not talking about things is probably the worst thing that we can do, right? To continue.
Mm-hmm.
Because that just allows things to percolate and perpetuate and all the P's.
Yeah, totally.
But always a good time. And I can't believe we just had to acknowledge 34 episodes. That's no small thing.
Wow. Not at all.
Because if you think about it, like, there's 52 weeks in a year. So to have 34 episodes as we come into our year anniversary, like, that's pretty amazing, actually.
Yeah, totally. We stuck with it, man.
Yeah. So we keep talking about it. I think episode 35, just to give you guys a preview, I think we've got to get into our this or that.
Yeah.
Kind of have a fun review. If you guys haven't listened to that episode, it's really cool. It's deeper insight into both who Mujib is and who I am, and we can see in real time maybe how we've changed or how we're changing, and that's kind of cool. So
with that said too, because I'm so excited to get into that, and we'll talk more about it, but like, again, how the context of the world will change, right? So one of the questions in the this or that was like Future or Drake, right? Now I might still enjoy Future a lot, but since we had that conversation, there's been more that's been revealed, more Drake in your life. Drake's released more dope projects. I'm gonna probably, if I'm gonna put one person's full catalog on and listen to every track, there's gonna be some more Future that I'm gonna skip now. You know what I mean? More Drake that I'm gonna hold on to. So again, it's like the world offers you this opportunity to shift perspective and to again give voice to others that you might not otherwise give.
I love what you say about that too, because this is just the fun part about this on just such a human level. I remember that conversation because you're all about Future, I was all about Drake. But after that episode, I was like, I gotta listen to more Future. So I think it's just one but small example, I think, of when we talk about all the time of just I think the positive influence you had on my life, and just the uniqueness of this relationship, and I'm just always so grateful. So yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Ditto.
So until next time, you guys, my name is Sarah.
My name is Mujib.
Thank you for listening to Let's Get to It. Be well.